Beanz. For WSMN 1590 and WSMN 95.3 FM Nashua, I'm Mark Rosenthal.
The views and opinions of the following show do not reflect those of WSMN, its owners, and/or associates.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We have a little bit of a change today. My intro music is hiding behind the scenes somewhere. So thank you for joining me today, WSMN 1590 AM, WSMN 95.3 FM. I am Tracy Beanz, and you are listening to UncoverDC with Tracy Beanz. It's good to see everyone today. If you are out and about in your car and listening on the radio, thank you so much. But if you're on socials, you can hear us streaming live every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. on CloutHub, on Periscope, on YouTube, on Facebook, on DLive, all over the internet. Hey guys, glad to be here. So it's Tuesday, and we had the first night of the Republican convention yesterday. It was really, really, really uplifting. And I had a lot of things that I was thinking about as we were going through the exercise of watching convention. And I wanted to share some of that stuff with you because it's important. And I've been involved in politics in some way, shape, or form for a little over 20 years, which sounds crazy, but it's true. And, you know, things have changed so much, even in just the past 4 or 5 years. So much is different than the way it was even 4 or 5 years ago. And I'll just tell you guys a little story. I used to work as a grassroots volunteer at a high level on the campaign for Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012. And it was kind of a war between the folks that were on the side of Ron Paul and liberty and his campaign and what his message meant, and what they called the, Republican establishment, which is something that President Trump's supporters have experienced firsthand. But we weren't at critical mass back then. We were kind of, 1 million or 2 million or 3 million strong, depending on the numbers you look at. But we were able to, in 2012, go into state conventions and go into state sort of operations. And we started to be able to advance the message of liberty very locally, which is exactly how it needs to be done. And it was embraced by communities, and people took seats on, Republican sort of delegations and committee meetings in these local communities. And Ron Paul was able to do what Ted Cruz tried to do in 2016 and grab up all of these delegates to vote for him at convention. It was really amazing. And we did an event right before convention in Florida called Paul Fest in 2012, which I helped to plan and run. And then we did convention after, and I was a delegate from New York, but obviously it didn't really matter because New York is New York. They were there at convention, and it was time for the delegates to pledge their votes, and something absolutely stunning happened. The RNC knew what was going on, changed the rules at the last minute, and then read a scripted roll call or scripted response, aye or nay, from the audience off of a teleprompter. And what that effectively did was shut out all of Ron Paul's delegates that he had gotten and make it so that they couldn't cast their vote or cast their, vote for Ron Paul. A lot of the time, at the time, people thought that we were some fringe, crazy conspiracy group that just didn't care. And we were really trying to reform the process from the inside out. And so the entire Maine delegation got up and left convention in 2012. As Maine goes, so goes the nation, they said as they walked out. And I witnessed this, and it was really horrible. It was like, that's it. I mean, this is a party and you ain't in it, right? This is a big club and you ain't in it. It's the establishment, swamp creature, rhino, Republican leftovers that you guys experience if you are involved in politics. But when the funniest thing was to me that in 2016, they tried to do the same thing again to President Trump, which is one of the reasons why he brought in Paul Manafort. He needed to manage that delegate strategy. was able to successfully manage it, but there were a lot of people in the Republican Party kicking and screaming about him getting the nomination in 2016. Once that happened, it's taken about 4 years, but we as a people, and this is what I keep on trying to say, the American people, whether you're on the left or the right, there is a fundamental change happening in American politics right now. And we're seeing grassroots candidates step up and unseat incumbents that have been in office forever because the public is just finished. And a lot of people are always very frustrated with the length of time that things are taking. They're very frustrated with how long justice takes to dole out. They're frustrated with how long change takes. But I am here to tell you honestly, as a person who's been participating in the process for so long, that the amount of time it has taken to awaken and alert and inform the American people in the past 5 years is mind-blowing as compared to the 15 previous. There is an amazing thing going on right now, and it's hard to see it with all the fire and the rioting and the anger and the hatred, but all of that is just a dying last gasp of a party and a people, including those on the right, that want power over you, asserting their will. They're asserting their will. And it's easy to get caught up in all of that when you're not taking a minute to stand back and look. So why am I bringing all this up? It's because I said yesterday that the convention this year is light years different than what we experienced ever before. Even the day meetings that I was watching were just different. It's not that I've changed, it's that changed. We've fundamentally changed the Republican Party in this country. And we were always outcasts to the party. The regular everyday American was really an outcast to the process. They were an outcast to what was going on. They were an outcast to being a part of the process. They were an outcast to all of it. Not anymore. And that, people were kind of pushing back on me. It was President Trump. Yeah, of course it was. He is the messenger. We are the message. We are screaming out what we want in this country, what we want to see, how we expect our politicians to behave and what we expect of them. The Republican establishment cannot get away with the things that they got away with before. And of course, we have a long way to go, a very long way to go. But watching this has really been inspiring to me because there's a lot to still do. But the fact that we're making any inroads at all is beautiful. And there's nothing that you're going to tell me that will change my mind because I have seen it on every side. I've seen it all, from the inner workings, from being cast out of the Republican Party as a whole. It's funny because everybody makes fun of the deplorables comment. But back in the day when libertarians were trying to get conservatives to become conservatives again, we were called ragamuffins because, everybody didn't wear a suit and tie and everybody wasn't prim and proper. We were all just kind of a ragtag bunch of Americans who were pissed off with the way things were going. And they started calling us ragamuffins. It's sort of the same thing as deplorables. Except everything's different now. And it's beautiful. So we're going to talk about the RNC a little bit now after that little open. Because it's inspiring and we need to stay positive. And last night was just amazing. It really was. I was watching it and I watched everybody speak. And I was like, this is just beautiful. This is America. And yes, there were stark warnings about things to come. Or what will be the result if we don't take care of what we need to take care of. But this was something else. So the ratings yesterday. First night of the RNC gets nearly 6 times more views on C-SPAN than DNC a week prior. The first night of the Republican National Convention drew nearly 6 times more viewers Monday than the first night of the DNC the week prior on C-SPAN. The C-SPAN live stream of the start of the RNC had roughly 440,000 views compared to the DNC's opening night, which brought in 76,000 on August 17th, said Nielsen. Nielsen's data showed that 18.7 million people watched the first night of the DNC, which included speakers like Republican, Ohio, you call him a Republican, Ohio Governor John Kasich, independent Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, and former First Lady Michelle Obama, who delivered the closing address with an emotional plea to vote for DNC presidential nominee Joe Biden. I'm surprised the Daily Caller wrote that. I really am. Because that's not how I would characterize what happened at the DNC last week. But let's talk about some of the speakers from last night. It was really, really amazing. We had Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, who spoke up about, his story, how he was, born into a single family household, lived in a 1,200 square foot house with just his family, his mom, and he flunked out of school. And then he, kind of got a smack in the behind and got his stuff back together, became a business owner, and then became a member of the House, and then the first black senator in a Republican district in South Carolina, or in the Republican state of South Carolina, and how one of the choice phrases of the night was, my family went from cotton to Congress in a lifetime. It was inspirational. It was uplifting. And of course, the response to this was to say that he was holding water for the president. I mean, the attacks on the speakers last night from this sort of hateful, counter insurgency was weak. They didn't have much of anything. It was a beautiful story. Tim Scott is a great guy, and as a constituent, I'm happy to vote for him. We had Steve Scalise talking about how President Trump visited him after he was shot by an extremist at the congressional softball game or baseball game. This is something that they don't ever want to tell you. It was a Bernie Sanders reporter who was sort of radicalized and shot up the congressional field. And Steve Scalise was shot, and he was kind of hanging on for dear life, and he talked about that. We had Matt Gaetz, who came out swinging, talking about Joe Biden, gave a fiery speech. Bette Midler came at Matt Gaetz, complaining about, where his son is and who's watching his son if he's there speaking. If he's there speaking, his son is in college. In case you guys didn't know, Matt Gaetz adopted a 13-year-old when he was 27, took him in and raised him, and he was a foster child. I think that's a beautiful story, and he's talked about his son recently. Jim Jordan had a very touching speech about what President Trump talked to him about when he had lost his nephew recently, and how he talked to the father of that child who was killed. And that was touching. And it just kind of gave more of the humanity that, Republicans and conservatives know of the president. And it just humanized everything. It really wasn't, Eva Longoria standing up there lecturing everyone, or Louis Dreyfus trying to pull some sort of a Saturday Night Live cabinet, parody. It wasn't any of those things. We had former UN ambassador in South Carolina, Governor Nikki Haley. I wasn't a big fan, personally. Too much me, too much poising for 2024 run. Just wasn't my thing. We had Vernon Jones. Vernon Jones was an amazing one. And again, you guys are listening to WSMN 1590 AM, WSMN 95.3 FM. You can hear us all over social media. If you're listening and you enjoy what you're hearing, please share this content with your friends. And thank you so much for spending an hour with me today. Vernon Jones was fantastic. He was a Democrat in Georgia who came out and supported the president, and the vitriol he faced was something else, really. It was bad news. I mean, he got attacked, told to step down. He almost did step down, and he decided not to. He spoke up and said that, the Democrat plantation is not a myth. They don't think that we can think for ourselves. And we can, and we are, speaking of African Americans. And I was attacked and slandered. And his talk was really good. I mean, it was really, really good. It was true. It was coming from someone who switched party. And, it's funny because I don't know if anybody knows this, but I'll tell you. I sit on the board of the Walkaway Foundation, and it's an honor for me to be there because it's an amazing organization. And they this is what Walkaway is. This is peak Walkaway. And I really wish, by the way, that Brandon was going to be speaking at one of these events because he deserves to be able to speak at one of them. And Scott Pressler. There's a lot of people I wish I could see there. A lot of people. But this is fundamentally why Walkaway was born. It's exemplifying it. Then we had Kim Klacik. Kim Klacik was another one I wanted to talk about. She did that viral campaign video, and we first came to know who she was when they were doing the Baltimore cleanups. And the Baltimore cleanups were something else. I remember Scott Pressler went down there, and then we lost I'm going to blank on the name, so I'm not going to say it. But Kim Klacik stepped up. She's running there. She's a Republican. She says one of many running to fix the mess in Democrat cities. She had a very powerful campaign ad that came out last week that got over 10 million views, and she spoke for 2 minutes and 30 seconds or so yesterday. Absolutely beautiful, passionate speaker. And they also had last night Mark and Patricia McCloskey. They were the St. Louis couple who were accosted when, I guess you could call them protesters. I don't even know anymore. Stormed through their gates and were outside on their property threatening them. They came out with firearms and they were charged. And they spoke about their experience and what it means and what their plight is right now, facing charges for defending themselves with a firearm when there are people threatening you. Sean Parnell spoke. He is a Republican congressional candidate in Pennsylvania. A veteran, super passionate speech. And it's interesting because, you don't realize how different it is to speak with no background, no crowd. It's very different than speaking in front of a crowd. And so when you're getting passionate, if you're coached on speeches, if you're coached on how to deliver, when you're getting passionate in front of a crowd, it's a little bit different. But Sean was passionate, and it just made sense. It was just really great. All of the speeches last night were just beautiful. And Andrew Pollack spoke. His daughter Meadow was killed in Parkland, and he spoke about how Biden didn't even remember when it happened. And he spoke about how the Obama policies were the reason why that student was left there after all of the warning signs and red flags with Parkland. He was there still because of this sort of like let's let kids stay in school, even if it was basically a money scheme. I'll try and find some information about it, but President Trump stopped that, and Biden pledges that he'll bring it back. Andrew Pollack was great. And we had Maximo Alvarez. Maximo Alvarez was the most powerful speech of the evening. I cried my eyes out. Oh, Herschel Walker. Yeah, I'll talk about him in a second. My bad. But I cried my eyes out when Maximo was speaking. He is an immigrant from Cuba who came, and he calls this his country. And he said, what I have made in this country is not 1% of what it has given me. Cuban American, beautiful, beautiful soul. most touching and truthful speech. And you know that there is little to condemn when the best they have is, you thought that was a good speech? You must have failed your speech watching class. That's what people are saying on Twitter. That's the retort. There's nothing you can say to that. It was completely truthful. It was his own story. You cannot combat that with platitudes and emptiness. That man was speaking from the heart. He got choked up a couple times during it. That was not some canned performance. That was a passionate plea from someone who has experienced what we're seeing right now attempt to take hold in this country. It was beautiful. And it was important. And shame on anybody who was trying to insult that man. So what if he's a donor to the RNC? Who cares? He's probably a donor because he realizes they're the only ones that aren't going to do to this country what we've seen done to so many before. So, Maximo's my hero. Herschel Walker, 37 years, 37 years, I forget, friends with President Trump, says that he takes it very personally when people call him a racist. Because he says, would I be friends with somebody for that long if they were a racist? And it's true. No, nobody thought that President Trump was a racist before he ran for president and decided to fix everything for everybody. The swamp is deep, friends. It is deep and it is wide. But this sort of a thing last night, it made a difference. It made a big difference. As a matter of fact, C-SPAN, one of the only places that you could watch it in its entirety. One of the only places you could watch it in its entirety, C-SPAN. I said this yesterday. Interesting what they're doing with this convention. They're not broadcasting it in full on any of the, quote, legacy main channels. And a lot of people are like, it's on OAN, it's on Right Side Broadcasting. I know, and it's great. Everybody should support those places. Send all your views over there. Amazing. My point was, if they don't show it, they don't have to report on the ratings. And I think that they don't even care about the money factor anymore. They're that desperate to stop this. But as we talked about at the beginning, it's not really working all that well now, is it? Fox kept cutting in with commentary. You know, CNN was fact-checking and MSNBC. And it's just like, just people are sick and tired. Which is why we had a caller into C-SPAN on the Democrat line last night who said that they will be supporting Republicans after being inspired on the opening night of the RNC, citing the heartfelt way participants came across to the American people. We do not need Hollywood celebrities. We do not need athletes and movie stars. We don't need any of you people to stand up on your soapboxes, your holier-than-thou soapboxes, and lecture to America what we're supposed to think, feel, and desire. We just need American people passionate about saving the country to talk. And that's what happened. The caller identified himself as Rick from Lorain, Ohio, told the station he decided in part to change his vote because of the way Republicans embraced the word God. Amen. God was front and center last night at the RNC. Front and center. It was a beautiful thing. It really was. So, this isn't the only one. As I said, I walk away. Walk away. We see it a lot with walk away every single day. And it's perfect. I mean, how do you put the two next to one another? I don't know how you compare the two. I mean, doom, the country is a horrible place. It's a nasty thing. You know, we don't like it, blah, 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 blah. And then on the other side, how great America is and how we need to keep it that way. We'll come back after the break.
This is UncoverDC with Tracy Beanz on WSMN, AM 1590 and FM 95.3.
middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. There was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the ad
Hey guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. You are listening to Uncover DC with Tracy Beanz on WSMN 1590 AM, WSMN 95.3 FM, and streaming live all over social media, anywhere that you could possibly land. YouTube, Clout Hub, Periscope, Facebook, DLive. It'll later be on BitChute. Thanks to everybody joining us in the chat too. I could see you guys. I can see you all. So thank you so much for your kind words. And even the trolls that are in there. Appreciate you guys very much. Again, if you want real, actual journalism, make sure you go to UncoverDC.com, where we have real journalism. Actual journalism is going on over there. Make sure you check it out. Support us and support all the great writers that are writing over there. I think a lot of people think it's a wholly volunteer operation. It is not. And we depend on your support to keep it going. So I appreciate everyone. Go to uncoverdc.com. You can find the little support button up at the top, and you can consume everything on the site completely free. Never behind a paywall. Voluntarily support us if you think we're doing good work, and we appreciate you very much. So, one last thing I wanted to talk to you about in terms of convention. I'm so excited for tonight. I don't even know how they compare. And I love that each night has its own theme. I shut off my stream last night that I was watching on RSBN. That's where I chose to watch it. And I just was so hopeful. I was like, this is what we need in this country right now. I mean, we so need this. There is no other word for it. Need. It is a absolute need. And 4 more years would really, I mean, it's going to be tumultuous. It's going to be crazy. We're going to talk about Kenosha. We're going to talk about what happened in Wisconsin, in Kenosha, in a second. But this is interesting. Here is a Politico live stream feed I'm looking at, by the way. I'm looking at a bunch of different columnists from Politico who are doing a live chat that gets broadcast on their website. It's called Live Updates and Analysis. And to read this as it goes on, like they're timestamped and everything, it's super interesting. What their thoughts are and stuff. Mark Caputo, who's a Biden campaign reporter, says, quote, "Tonight begins a new chapter in the great American story. The best is yet to come, .. McDaniel's message here underscores the difficulty that Trump has. It's the message of an outsider or challenger, not an incumbent president presiding over an economy that is worsened on his watch as 177,000 people have died during a pandemic." I dispute the 177,000. And I really, really wish we could get an accurate count on that. Because it's probably, I can't make a guess, but it's not 177,000. I personally know now 4 or 5 people who lost loved ones during this pandemic, not to the pandemic, and got labeled a COVID death. This is happening all over the country. All over the country. So Charlie, who's a senior politics editor, says, in my mind, it's no contest. The roll call paled in comparison to what the Dems came up with last week. The DNC was a horribly produced Zoom meeting, is what it was. But if you want to see what these folks have to say about what's going on and what kind of lame excuses they come up with to poo-poo the entire uplifting, amazing convention we saw yesterday and we'll see today again, then you can head on over to Politico, where they'll give you all of that stuff. Shifting gears. We're shifting gears over to what happened with Jacob Blake. So there was a officer-involved shooting in Wisconsin. And I didn't say a word about it. I waited because we never, ever get the full story right away. And we didn't. It's funny. Somebody is texting me right now. Tracy, it's Kenosha. That's what I said, didn't I? Kenosha. That's what I said. I thought I did anyway. Kenosha. It's funny when you're on radio and people are listening to you that know you and they're texting you pronunciations. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, everyone. It's very helpful. I am like notorious for pronouncing things incorrectly. Absolutely notorious. Anyway, so there was this horrible Kenosha incident and their police department tweeted out a release. This is an article written by UncoverDC news reporter Sharon Black, where we reported what happened. Of course, you know, it later turned out that this man had issues. He had issues. He had a criminal record, and he was apparently, as for information that's coming out now, it appears as though he actually was with a weapon. And they tried to tase him. It didn't work. They tried to subdue him on the ground. He got away. When he got away from another angle that you can see, he ran around the front of the car and went to get in and grab something from his car, as per the officers, and they shot him. It's horrible that this happened. His kids were in the car, for goodness sakes. Nobody likes to see this stuff. But every time there's an interaction between police and a suspect or a person like this, we cannot have paid agitators and citizens get together to burn down their neighborhoods and all the businesses. We can't keep having this happen. Rioters and looters took to the streets, setting fires while vandalizing and stealing from multiple businesses throughout the area. What does that have to do with anything? This is the thing. It is just unrest. And I've seen there was this one poor guy in like a pickup truck who's driving around trying to survey damage, trying to stop people from destroying car dealerships. This is a small town. He's driving around and he's confronted by a group of BLM rioters who say that it's the system that they're after. And he's trying to plead with them, telling them that furniture store is not the system. That coffee shop that's owned by your community. That they're trying to make a living, and they're like, we'll burn your business down too. People are done with this. The National Guard's on the ground right now. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're burning their entire community to the ground. It is not affecting change. And this is very much planned and orchestrated. Now, I have somebody telling me, uncorroborated, that they brought people in. Do I doubt that? Absolutely not. If somebody can provide tangible that this happened, we will gladly report on that. But who's organizing these people? I'm seeing them going into local communities and homeowners are shooting off warning shots. This is the chaos that BLM and Antifa bring to your neighborhood. There are charter buses sitting in Florida right now. I saw a picture with BLM all over them. Listen, this is not working anymore. The citizens in this neighborhood are not having it. They're very angry. Jacob Blake is paralyzed from the waist down as of now. The doctors are not sure whether or not that injury will be permanent. But he's alive. And where there are noble people that come out, think they're doing something good, protesting, there are people that have overtaken these protests to completely destabilize the entire community. There was a curfew. Nobody listened to it. Shop owners watching their businesses burn to the ground after just getting back to work after coronavirus. This is ridiculous. And you can't have law enforcement afraid to do their job because of what will happen afterwards if, God forbid, there's a confrontation. Do you remember what happened? Do you remember what happened when we got the body camera footage of the George Floyd incident? It was a much different story. Much different story. So, if anybody can send anything, the address is tips@uncoverdc.com. Tips@uncoverdc.com. And a lot of these people, they're just so disillusioned. They have no idea what Black Lives Matter even stands for. They don't know what their values are or lack of values or whatever their mission statement is. They don't know. And they think it's you've got corporations in this country sending hundreds of millions of dollars to this organization, who, by the way, is suing the Trump admin right now. They're suing the Trump administration for what happened at Lafayette Square Park when the president walked over to the church. Really, really something. So we're going to switch gears a little bit right now to Spygate. Close out the show for the next 15 or so minutes with Spygate. We had Kleinsmith appear in court, and a lot of people have their opinions on Kleinsmith and what's going on. There's a lot of good stuff out there. But what I want to focus on right now is actually Brennan, not Kleinsmith. There was an amazing article on Red State written by a contributor to UncoverDC as well, Shipwrecked Crew. And this column by Red State actually deserves to be read. John Brennan went and sat down with John Durham, CIA headquarters in Virginia. And his spokesperson put out a statement. And everybody ran with the statement and said, oh my gosh, he's going to get away with it. He's not a target, blah, 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 blah. You know, John Brennan's not going to face any accountability. This is just, first of all, there's a lot of things with this statement that are interesting. And Ship here does a great job going through them. We're going to read it because it's that important. It's not that long. Everybody listen to this about Brennan. John Brennan's longtime advisor, Nick Shapiro, put out a statement yesterday at the conclusion of Brennan's 8-hour interview with John Durham and his investigators. 8 hours. It might all be true. He says, all I have are opinions on the text and circumstances. But I also know that the CIA is an institution designed to engage in manipulation using lies and deception in a good way. It's how they accomplish their mission in defense of the country. John Brennan is an embodiment of the CIA. It's all he's ever known. Its ethos oozes from his pores. John Brennan wanted to send a message to the world after he finished his interview with John Durham. Oddly, he chose to do it through Nick Shapiro and not himself. Nothing about Brennan or his history suggests Shapiro's message needs to be credited with being truthful. There are several reasons to read this message with a jaundiced eye and to recognize the ulterior motives for it. First, it's not Brennan's statement. Shapiro issued the statement to Obama administration scribe Natasha Bertrand at Politico, guaranteed to dutifully publish anything requested of her by a former Obama-era intelligence official now living in fear. Shapiro then posted a string of 8 tweets on Twitter with the same text. Both are devoid of any words actually spoken by Brennan. There are no quotations, nor is there any support offered for Shapiro's claims by anyone in the room, such as Brennan's attorneys. Since when has Brennan been shy about saying anything on Twitter? Why would Brennan go to third person and have his thoughts about the interview expressed only in the words of someone else? The most obvious reason is the statements aren't going to be exactly accurate. Running them through a third person builds a level of deniability on Brennan's part. Shapiro wasn't in the room for the interview. Shapiro's only putting out for public consumption what was told to him. And by phrasing it in the third person the way he has, it's not a statement by John Brennan, nor is it endorsed by Brennan's counsel in the room. Listen closely. It's put out by a guy who has historically been in the role of misleading and misdirecting the press and public on John Brennan's behalf. Yesterday's mission was no different. Second, conducting the interview at CIA facility is an interesting decision. Why not question him at DOJ or FBI? The CIA is not a law enforcement agency. John Brennan no longer works for the CIA. Any CIA records that could have been needed over the course of the interview could have been made available in a secured facility at both of those locations. But that, quote, records excuse may have been the very justification given for the selection of the CIA HQ as the location. DOJ and FBI are in D.C. CIA is in Langley, Virginia. If you're geographically challenged, you can read the distinction as United States District Court for the District of Columbia versus United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. If John Brennan offered any false answers to the investigators during the interview, the venue for that crime is in the EDVA, not in D.C. federal court. Third, Shapiro's statement claims Brennan was told by Durham that he is neither a target nor a subject. This is super important right here. He's only a witness to events under review. Maybe that's true, but it doesn't sound true to me. And the statement doesn't say that comment was made to Brennan yesterday before the interview took place. I can say that he's a former U.S. attorney. I can say I had several occasions during my career as a prosecutor where criminal defense lawyers have asked me similar questions about their client in response to a request for an interview. Can't say I always refused to answer, but as a general matter, my response was something that I learned when I was starting out from more experienced federal prosecutors. Counsel, this interview today is voluntary. Your client is free to leave right now and answer none of the questions we have. He's free to stop answering questions at any time while the interview is underway. He's free to ask, to take a break, step outside the room with you, and then return to answer the questions or not answer the question. What does he want to do? Brennan could have been questioned before a grand jury without the presence of an attorney in the room. That would be true if, as suggested by Shapiro's statement, Brennan was only a witness. Listen closely, guys. I'm serious. To explain that, let's take a moment to address the whole target versus subject versus witness construct the press is so happy to report about. Labeling an individual a target has a clear meaning in federal criminal prosecutions. It refers to someone about whom the prosecutor believes there is already sufficient admissible evidence to seek an indictment from a grand jury and obtain a conviction at trial. The investigation's ongoing, but the grand jury has already identified a target for eventual prosecution. Anyone who's not a target is not a target. There's no other classification of individuals with that meaning. Many people in the business toss around the term subject, but it's a made-up classification that doesn't exist. I have received subject letters from prosecutors on behalf of clients, but those all involve a request to interview. A target letter is different. When you receive a target letter, it advises you that a grand jury has already received evidence upon which criminal charges may be issued in the future. It advises the target they should seek counsel, and if they can't afford one, they can get one appointed. Once they've secured it, their lawyer should contact the prosecutor. The purpose behind a subject letter is merely to instill fear in the recipient and encourage them to talk about others before others talk about them, as information from others may push them closer to the target category. Unwitting lawyers think there's meaning behind the subject designation, but there isn't. Fear is a great motivator. Doing unto others before they do unto you is sort of a universal maxim among the idiot criminal class. So if you're not a target, meaning there isn't sufficient evidence at this time to charge you with the crime, then by default, you're a witness. But witnesses can and often do talk themselves into being targets during such interviews. That was the purpose of the interview, Mr. Brennan, not because you have some wonderful insights to provide Mr. Durham and his investigators to make his job easier. One important distinction between target and witness, not well understood but may be in play here, is that it is against DOJ policy to issue a grand jury subpoena to someone who is already a target. A grand jury subpoena is a court order under threat of contempt to appear and answer questions under oath without the presence of counsel. If a person's already a target, the subpoena intrudes upon their Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Witnesses before the grand jury are allowed to assert their Fifth Amendment right, but it forces them to assert that right before the grand jurors considering charges against them. The government's not allowed to call a criminal defendant to take stand in the trial and force him to assert his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. It's deemed prejudicial. So if John Brennan isn't a target, why was he not called to explain historical events? Finally, he's many times expressed the belief that any investigation initiated by the Trump admin into the actions of the Obama admin to explain their conduct is illegitimate. The idea that Brennan questioned Durham on this topic doesn't confirm that Durham had any response. I suspect he didn't react favorably if it happened at all. But John Brennan can't help himself. The CIA is rarely put in a position of having to explain or defend itself. John Durham and his team did not come to the decision to interview Brennan over the course of 8 hours for the purpose of, quote, filling in the blanks on events that are currently under review. The purpose of the interview was to get Brennan to confirm or deny information that others have provided up to this point about Brennan and what he instructed others to do. He was placed in a perjury trap because he's shown himself willing to perjure himself in the past to evade scrutiny. The ability to avoid the trap was completely within his control. All he had to do was tell the truth in front of Durham. But for the most part, Durham's investigators already know the truth. John Brennan doesn't come from a world of objective truths and lies. For Brennan, the truth is always malleable to fit his needs at any given moment. That is tradecraft, CIA tradecraft. He sees himself as a master of such dark arts based on his decades in D.C. Others have long viewed him as a clown. That's why, as a prosecutor, you save a liar like John Brennan for last. He can't help you because you can't rely on what he tells you. So your interview isn't done for the purpose of helping your case. And you do it in Virginia and not D.C. because of what you plan to do next. Fantastic column about what happened with Brennan going in front of Durham for 8 hours last week. There's a lot of chatter and talk about what's coming next in Spygate. I think there's a potential for one of the other sort of, quote, lower level folks to be indicted or plea. I think that Stephen Soma has a lot to do with this. He was at the Southern District of, he was in the FBI New York branch. And what's interesting about that is that they were also the ones involved with the Wiener laptop emails. And I'm trying to find a little bit deeper of a connection there that I know exists. And I can't find just yet. But I'm on it. He was Stefan Halper's handler. Thursday on the show, I'm going to be interviewing Lee Smith. He just came out with a book, The Permanent Coup. He also had a book that came out earlier, The Plot Against the President, where he wrote about Objective Medusa. That is the name of the Devin Nunes-Hipsey investigation into Spygate that was co-run by Kash Patel. They had to cut it off at the head. They called it Medusa. And we talk a lot about Stefan Halper and his role in all of this. And as you guys know, I've interviewed Svetlana Lukova a lot, a few times, 3 times, I believe now at this point. And she was very much involved there as well. And if you listen to Thursday's show, I interviewed Akeem Optikin, who was also involved in the General Flynn case. It was all, the Permanent Coup is a fantastic book about all of the different things that have been going on that weave together into a tapestry to try and stop the progress that President Trump has been making in an America First agenda, which absolutely destroys this globalist push that we see the world, for the most part, trying to cram down an unwilling populace's throat. In his book, he brings up George H.W. Bush, and how he started talking about globalism. Globalism is an undercurrent across this entire thing. That's why we have the George Soroses of the world and the foreign NGOs funding the uprising that's going on across the country right now. They're just very well organized, is all. We just don't riot, is all. Real quick, someone sent me something this morning about mosquitoes, genetically modified mosquitoes. And apparently this is a Bill Gates initiative, so I just wanted to share it with you. The article is on thescientist.com. It's written by Lisa Winter. With the aim of reducing rates of the mosquito-borne illnesses, yellow fever, and dengue, a pilot program will release 750 million genetically modified mosquitoes into the Florida Keys in 2021. Thanks to approval by the Barrier Islands Mosquito Control District Board of Commissioners on a meeting on Tuesday, August 18th. Over the last 10 years, Oxitec deployed these GM mosquitoes in the Cayman Islands and Brazil. This is the first release of genetically modified mosquitoes in the United States. And the CDC and scientists at the University of Florida will oversee the program. These are male mosquitoes that will attack female mosquitoes during mating. And Oxitec is a U.S.-owned, UK-based company that provides targeted biological insect control solutions. What it basically is this male mosquito will, during mating, infect the female mosquitoes that are capable of biting, because male mosquitoes don't bite, and make it so that they die. So this is coming to this press release is on their website, coming to Florida in 2021. GM mosquitoes. I'm getting my notification. Thank you. Just a couple quick notes for you guys before we end today. You can please consider supporting UncoverDC and our awesome authors at UncoverDC.com. If you click on support, there'll be a link. Coming up very soon, we will have some options for monthly support that I really hope you guys will take advantage of. It's so important. And I've got some really amazing stuff in the works. Just a little calendar of events. On October 2nd and 3rd, we will be in DC for the second annual Walkaway March on Washington, which is going to be fantastic. There is a women's event on Friday night, not a women's event that only women can go to, but it's women speaking. It's Lara Trump, Diamond and Silk, Katie Hopkins, etc. So definitely, they're doing rallies all over the country. There'll be one in South Carolina in September that I will be at as well. But here is the weekend. DC, October 2nd at Sylvan Theater. Shamika Michelle, Lara Trump, Diamond and Silk, Katie Hopkins. Then Saturday will be the march and rally. Make sure you guys can come, get out there. You've been clamoring for something to do. Well, here's something. And then the week after that, I will be in Miami. So check it out. Until Thursday, people. Thanks for listening.
For hardworking Americans, Uncover DC with Tracy Beanz on WSMN, AM 1590 and FM 95.3.